Good morning, everyone. Trinity Church. This is what we call at Trinity, we call it our Sunday Adult Forum, and we have series of classes throughout the year. Our philosophy and what we're looking to do during this time is class that we explore the scripture, class where we explore current events, class where we explore maybe theology, and classes where we explore more about Trinity. So just along the way throughout the year to touch upon different aspects of our life of faith. So welcome to everyone today. And I'm really pleased today to welcome James Bradley, who's a member of Trinity Church and a member of the Cherokee Nation. And he has come to share with us so much about this culture, this intersection. Originally, I said to James, let's learn more, teach us about the place of faith and religion among the Cherokee people, and the place of the Christian tradition as well. And we're going to learn that and so much more. So welcome to everyone here in the room. Welcome to everyone online. James has a few slides. And what I'm going to do in just a moment is through Zoom, use the screen share feature so that people online can see it just as much as those of us here in the room. And if there's something you can't particularly see the writing, just raise your hand and ask what it says. You know, maybe we need a huge screen here somewhere, but anyway, you see how that works. So the Lord be with you. Let us pray. Be with us, most gracious God, on this day of beauty and of grace, the day on which we celebrate your resurrection to eternal life. Be with us in this space as we continue to learn more and more how to follow you and how to be your people. In your name we pray. Amen. I'm going to let James say a few words about himself. I could do it, but I think he can do it better. I'm going to sit close because I'm going to work the technology here a little bit. So, see if I can do it.
Shio Othashonale, Sinishi Tutanala Dagwado. Good morning, hello. My name is James Bradley. As Scott said, I'm a member of the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians. I was born and raised in Cherokee, grew up, went to college, became a dancer, performer, lived in all over the East Coast, and moved home, not willingly, from New York City years ago, never planning to stay. But things in Cherokee had changed quite a bit since I was growing up, and there were a lot more opportunities there, thanks to gaming and the opportunities that opened up for the tribe. So landed in a good job, got a better job, ended up working for the chief. And so it's been quite an adventure. And sometimes I would be in meetings with the chief and the vice chief and tribal council, and I would think, I'm a dancer, what am I doing in here? Okay, we've got about 40 minutes to get through 10,000 years of Cherokee history. This lesson, I wanted to give you a background on Cherokee itself and where we came from up until right before the removal. And then next week, we will talk about Christianity and its effects, both positive and negative, on the Cherokee themselves, and how different religious organizations worked with or worked against the tribe and how that affected us. And then the third lesson, we will take both of these two things and talk about where Cherokees are now, both spiritually, economically, and culturally. So this first slide is the seal of the Cherokee Nation of the Eastern Band. There's so much to tell you. I apologize if I stumble over words. So this is the 7-pointed star, which represents the 7 clans of the Cherokee. And if you will notice, there's not one pointing up at the top. And that's because no clan is better than any other clan. So Cherokees, next slide, I think. I don't know how well you can see this, but this is the original territory the Cherokees covered. Kentucky, Tennessee, Georgia, Alabama, the Carolinas, and the Virginias. We covered 8 different states. I was thinking coming over here, the tribe, our tribe has been in the historical record since DeSoto first came to this land in the 1540s. We were powerful, we were big. Everybody that came to America from Europe and other countries had to come through us, had to deal with us. And so there's this idea, and some of our own people even say this as well, that Native Americans and Cherokee specifically don't look at you when they're talking to you, because that's traditional and that's not our culture. We were very proud of ourselves. We called ourselves the principal people, was one of our names. And so the idea that, and I do not want you to go or come to this class and leave with the idea that, oh, the poor Cherokees, they were put upon and we were so mean to them. Did we struggle? Yes. Did all races struggle? Yes. Did we survive? Yes. We're resilient and we're strong. And that's what I want you guys to learn from this. And it's because we adapt well to new ideas. We deal well with people. We build relationships with other races as they came, and we worked together and adapted to what was coming and what happened. So resiliency and strength is the 2 things I want you to remember. Originally, Cherokee villages were independent. It was kind of a loose federation. It wasn't a huge tribe with a central government. Each village had their own chief, and every village had 2 chiefs. There was a war chief, who was the red chief, and a peace chief, who was the white chief. And so depending on what feathers were on the council house, you probably knew anyway because you lived there, but that would signify who was in the authority, who had the authority at that time. There was always a beloved woman who sat with the chiefs. She was a very respected elder. And we continue that tradition today by naming beloved women, and we also have named a few beloved men. But in Cherokee, the women, we were matrilineal and matrilocal, which meant we followed our bloodlines through our mothers, and the females in the tribe held the property. So women were very revered and very, an integral part of Cherokee society. Women chose when the village went to war and when they didn't, because it was their sons that were going to be fighting and dying. Women held the property, and when they got married, if they didn't want to be married anymore, they just packed their husband's stuff up and set it outside the house. He would go back to live with his mother and his sisters. So when a man got married, he joined his wife's clan, and her brothers were actually in charge of raising the children. That was not his job. It was the uncle's job to raise the kids and teach them what they needed to know about the clans. Every clan had a different duty within the tribe. Some were medicine people and healers, and some were concentrated on farming. So there was a system set up within the clan system that helped every village operate. Next slide, please.
Hold on, this goes to sleep. Is that the one?
Yes.
Okay.
This is the mound at Gadua, which is at Swain County. That was out of our possession since before, right around removal, which was 1838. We bought this land back in 1997. That was one of the first purchases we made with the proceeds from gaming. This was the spiritual town of the Cherokee. This is our mother town, is what we call it. So this mound would have been much, much higher. The council house would have sat on top of it. Every council house in every Cherokee village was 7-sided, and all the clans sat in their specific sites. When you went into the council house, whatever issues were before the tribe, Cherokees ruled by consensus. So you stayed in the council house and everybody had their say until the village decided what steps they were going to take. There were some medicine people that may have been buried within the mound. That was a common occurrence. It did happen, but that wasn't a common occurrence. So we have a celebration here every year because this is really significant. There are 4 mountains that surround Gadua Fields. Water Rock Knob, Queenman's Dome, which we're trying to rename back to the Cherokee name, Kawobi, I believe what the original name was. Wyum, Bald, and Cowie Mountain. And at the time this was built, those 4 mountains cross in that exact point. If you drew straight lines through each mountain, that's where they would cross, where that mount sits. So this is where Cherokees became Cherokees, where the clan system was initiated, where the green corn ceremony every fall is the New Year's for Cherokee. So every green corn ceremony, everybody would put out all their fires, go to the council house, relight their fires, and go back to their houses and light the fires within their own homes. When DeSoto came across the mountains, and other people came across the mountains, we had, and I'll show you this in a minute, we had mud and daub huts where you put up sticks and then you put mud around them. And then they would paint those with kaolin. They would mix up kaolin, which is a kind of clay that has a lot of mica in it. So when Europeans would come across the mountains, one of them wrote that they came across in the morning and the sun was shining on the village that was at Gadua, and all the houses were sparkling because of all the mica that was in it. So they were really impressed with that. So next slide, please. This is what a Cherokee village would have looked like. That's the mound with the council house. These are the different homes of the people. I don't know that all of them would have had a fence around them, but some of them did for protection. See, next slide, I think. This is what the council house would have looked like. This is, all council houses were made this way, and they were big enough to accommodate several hundred people. Everybody in the village had to have access to the council house when there was a meeting. So they were huge. Okay, next. These are examples. Cherokees had 2 types of homes. We had a winter house, which was enclosed, and then a summer house. So this would be the construction for the winter house. And this is the construction for, which is more like a, just an open air kind of thing. And then those would be beside each other and the family would move back and forth as necessary throughout the seasons. Okay, next. And this is what they would actually look like. This is a model at the museum in Cherokee, but that's an example of the mud and daub and then the summer homes. Okay. These are important mounds in Western North Carolina. We set up a 501c3 to oversee Niquosi Mound. And we have Gadua Mound, and the Nunani is in Cherokee. That's the word for potato. Nuna is where that comes from. Recently, we completed a study with the elders with Western Carolina University. There's a mound in Watauga that comes down. If you follow, it follows a straight line. Watauga, I think it's Cowie and Niquosi, but those are built in relation to those stars in Orion's belt. And the council house that sat on top of the Watauga Mound was situated so that twice a year the sun shines straight through the front entrance, and all of the sacred pipes and any other items would receive that light and be blessed. So we weren't just farmers and hunters. We were astronomers, we were engineers, we were scientists, like every other culture. Okay, next. This is the Naquasi Mound in the early 40s. Still has quite a bit of size on it. And then this is the Naquasi Mound now. Over the years, farmers that had land that was originally Cherokee property didn't really know what the significance of these sites. So a lot of them were taken down by tractors and things to flatten out the land. So we lost a lot of the mounds that we would normally have. Okay. These masks represent the 7 clans of the Cherokee. Let me see if I can name them all. Wolf, Blue, Deer, Long Hair, Paint, Bird, and Wild Potato. I know the Blue clan were mostly medicine people. All I know about the Long Hair is that they were really arrogant and they had like these really fancy hairdos. But this is how Cherokees split themselves up. And like I said earlier, every clan had their own special contribution to the tribe and to each village. We actually, the man that carved these gave us permission. We redid Unto These Hills in 2006. And we included the clan spirit as part of that rewrite. And so these were the basis for the gigantic clan masks we used in that show. Next. Okay. So we started out that big area of land where all the Cherokees lived. And of course, over the years, it dwindles down and we see some and we lose some in battles and stuff. So on July 2nd, 1791, the US and Cherokee Nation signed the Treaty of Holston. It was signed by Governor William Blount of the Southwest Territory on behalf of President George Washington. Among the terms of the treaty, the Cherokee ceded more land and the US government agreed to furnish them with farming implements, spinning wheels, and looms. Some 1,200 Cherokee attended. The treaty was signed by 41 Cherokee chiefs with witnesses representing the US from Georgia, North Carolina, Virginia, and the Kentucky Territory. I bring this up because this is the land cessation that gave away the land where Asheville now sits. And the Cherokee call Asheville, oh, that's not Tohishki, that's somebody's name. I'm sorry, I went right out of my head. But it translates to Tokiashti, that's what it is. It translates to where they race. So apparently that's not us racing, that's y'all racing. After we ceded the land, there were apparently horse races or boat races or something. The common idea is that there were boat races on the French Broad, and that's where the Cherokees came up with that name. That's all the land on all those 8 states, and these are all the cessations that happened. And we are right here now. We went from, I think, 100 million square acres to 60,000. So, and some of the first cessations happened in South Carolina, and that's where centralized government for Cherokees became a thing, because it was very difficult for all the different states and territories to negotiate land cessations with every village and every chief, because everybody wanted something different. And so the governor of South Carolina decided, hey, it'd be really great if we convince them to have a central government, and then we can just negotiate with the chief and council. So that's what happened, and that's how we're still governed today. Okay. This is Georgia, North Carolina, and Tennessee. This is before removal. This is where most of the Cherokees were living. These are the middle towns, which is, let's see, that would be Silva, Jackson County. That's the Packasegee River. The valley towns are where Cherokee is now, modern day Cherokee. And the overhill towns were in Western Tennessee and a little bit of Eastern North Carolina. So the majority of the Cherokee Nation resided in Georgia. And like it said in the Holston Treaty, the government's idea was to civilize Cherokee tribes or all the southeastern tribes. And so instead of being hunters and farmers, the women did the farming, the men did the hunting and gathering. That was their jobs. Cherokees accepted same-sex couples in their society. The rule was one of them had to farm and one of them had to hunt, just like every other couple. There were some of the research I've done said that Native tribes, Cherokee specifically, recognize at least 5 different genders. So I know that's a big thing in America right now, but to Indigenous people, that's just part of being human. And actually, gay and lesbian people were seen as extra spiritual because they could see both sides, whereas men could see one thing and women could see the other thing. Gay people and lesbians were felt that they could see both sides and they had a better connection with the spiritual world. Okay. In the 1700s, Ostanaka is this chief, and some other Cherokee people went to London to represent the tribe. They were well received, they were rock stars. They went to Covent Garden and thousands of people came to see them. They slept around with English. And this is how Cherokees were dressing at that time. This is probably kind of ceremonial stuff. Wouldn't be everyday wear around the village. But these loops on some of the men for a while, Cherokee men would split the skin on their ears and those muscles right there. They would pull them out and wrap them in silver. Yeah. It was incredibly painful and it didn't last very long, thank goodness. So this was the first exposure of Cherokees to European culture in Europe itself. And there is an exhibit at the museum where this is represented. I think they left from Charleston. These 3 men are standing on the wharf at Charleston. And at the time, I think that was 97, 98, they took 3 of the male council members and made the mannequins. So the chairman of council, whose name at that time was Dan McCoy, and I was in the museum kind of walking through, they were doing a lot of renovations and they had these things in crates. And I walked by and I looked over and there's Dan McCoy in a box. That was really weird, but so this visit had a major impact on Cherokees going forward. This is Mike Crow Jr., who is a dancer, a storyteller, an actor. He's a really cool guy. And also in the 1750s, Henry Timberlake came to the Overhill villages in Tennessee and wrote quite extensively about what he saw there. And so several years ago, the museum did an exhibit based on what Timberlake saw. And so many things came out of that. This is how a Cherokee warrior would have dressed in the 1750s to go to battle. We also discovered that what we thought was traditional Cherokee pottery was not traditional Cherokee pottery. You may have seen the heavy black pottery if you've ever been to Cherokee and to any of the craft shops. It's really thick and really heavy. What we discovered was there was a way to make pottery that was really light. And so they made these huge vessels. And the clay the walls would be much thinner than what we thought was traditional. And it took the potters in Cherokee a while to figure out how they did that. But eventually they figured out that if you take a form and put the clay around it and then remove the form, the clay holds together and it's very strong. So that's one of the things that came out of the Timberlake exhibit, new ways to make pottery. And it's taken off like crazy. The museum offers all kinds of classes for potters, for people that are interested. And so what they would do with those big pots was build a fire, put the embers around the pot, make venison stew in it, and let it sit in that heat all day, kind of like a crock pot. And then the whole village would come and eat together out of those. Something else that came out was how people dressed, leggings, long linen shirts. The men wore like leggings from here down. And there's debate over how much we actually did that. The way Americans and Europeans describe Cherokees and other native tribes is not necessarily what the actual truth was. So when they talk about native women being practically naked, it just meant their dresses were above their ankles.
Oh my.
They weren't running around. And so the tribes kind of adopted that 1750s look as traditional clothing, but Cherokees, like I said earlier, adapted. So before contact, we would have had hides, we would have tanned hides and made leggings and things like that. After Europeans came and we had access to beads and fabric and needles and thread, it changed how we dressed. We supported the British in the American Revolution. So when the Americans won, our ability to trade with Britain was gone. So we had to deal with Americans, which meant we got different materials to make clothes out of. On the Trail of Tears, they didn't have needles and thread, so they had what they called hair dresses, and that was traditional Cherokee for a long time. So every time some event happened to us, it affected how we dressed and what access we had to materials like that. And that's one of the things that I believe are why Cherokees are still here, is because we're so adaptable to that stuff. Next. Here's Kadua, the Cherokee mother town. It was destroyed in 1776 by the Rutherford expedition. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the Rutherford expedition. It happened in the spring and summer of in the fall of 1776. So here's how history is different for the winners and losers. The winners say, oh, the Cherokee were rebelling, and so we marched through and burnt their villages and we put them in their place. And in our oral histories, it was a time when our warriors were all fighting different battles. So when Rutherford came through, it was women, children, and the elderly that were in the villages. There was nobody to fight back. And what they did, Kadua has the archaeological information they've gathered from down there. There's 14 different sites where villages were at various times. That was the last village there with the one Rutherford destroyed. They burnt down all the houses, burnt down all the cornfields in the fall. So that left us in the wintertime with nothing to eat. And one of the soldiers wrote, the only thing that was left were the tracks of the kids running through the burnt cornfields to get away from the soldiers. So different perspectives on events that happened. Okay, next. By the early 1800s, Cherokees had started moving more toward log cabins. The clan system started to fail and fall apart when intermarriage started happening, and that happened quite a bit between, especially people from Great Britain, Irish, Scottish people, and because in that society, the men were more in power. If you married a Cherokee woman, they expected her to live that way. She wasn't in charge, she didn't own the property. So it caused a lot of dissension in the tribe and started really breaking up the clan system. And another thing that the clans did, if Scott and I were in different clans and I killed Scott, Scott's family and clan members would come kill me or kill a member of my family, and then it was even. So that blood law in the clans also stopped as there was more intermarriage with Europeans. Some people today in Cherokee know what their clans are. My family was kicked out of the clan system. My great-grandmother on my mom's side was a white woman, so we're out. You can be adopted into a clan. We haven't done that yet. I don't know. My family's not very traditional, so that's probably not going to happen. But that's how easily things can change completely for families. Okay. This is Sequoia. His name in Cherokee is Shiguanya. And it always amazes me when trucks are named after him and giant trees are named after him, because his name actually means little pigfoot. He was lame, he was illiterate, he was a half-breed. He lived in the eastern Tennessee area, was born and raised there. So he was lame, he had a cane, so when he walked, that made like a track in the dirt that looked like a pig's hoof, and that's where his name came from. He started the syllabary, working on the syllabary. He worked for 14 years. His wife and her brothers thought he was crazy. So one day they went out and he took little pieces of wood and he would burn the different symbols on the pieces of wood, and that's how he was keeping track of his work. One day they went out and kicked all his stuff in the fire and told him to go kill a deer, go do something productive. So he started work again. It was another 10 years for him to replicate that work. And it's a syllabary, not an alphabet. There are 86 syllables in the Cherokee language. So each syllable has a symbol. So it's very easy. Like, I know how to write my name, see me, she, because I can look on that chart and find those syllables and write them down. So the way he convinced the tribe to adopt the syllabary, he went into a tribal council meeting. People still thought he was crazy. He wrote something down. He told them what it said. One of his daughters was somewhere else. He left. They brought her in. She picked it up and she read it and told them what he written down. So almost overnight, the Cherokee's literacy rate went from 0 to 97%. We printed our own newspapers, our own books. One of the first things they printed was the Bible, hymnals, and we still have those things in Cherokee. And now we're also doing stuff like Charlotte's Web. I have a copy of Charlotte's Web in the syllabary. When Charles Frazier wrote 13 Moons, which is kind of centered on Cherokee. One of our beloved women, who is a first language speaker, helped him translate that book, syllabary. So we have that as well. So those are cool things.
What year was it?
Yours was chief, so around 2000, 2001.
And what's its dates?
He was born in the late 1700s, I think. But another interesting thing about Sequoia is there was a lot of course, discussion about what was going to happen to the Cherokee, and the federal government, of course, wanted us to move. So there were a group of Cherokees who decided about 10 years before removal, look, they're going to move us anyway. We might as well go on our own. So he was in the group that moved to Oklahoma about 10 years prior to removal. And that group became what is now called the United Gadua Band of Cherokees. And then during removal, the Cherokee Nation, which was centered in Georgia and was the larger portion, was moved out. And that became Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma. And then in the late 1800s, we were always there, but we were formally recognized by the federal government as the Eastern Band. So Sequoia was instrumental in establishing the United Gadua Band. He actually ended up in Mexico. He was in Mexico when he died. This is a syllabary. Cherokee is very nasally and it's kind of mumbly, so you don't really open your mouth and enunciate very well. We have less than 200 fluent speakers in the tribe currently, and they are all senior citizens, and we're losing them at a very rapid and scary rate. The 3 Cherokee tribes have annual council together every summer, and a couple of years ago decreed that the tribe was in, or the language was in critical state. So we're all 3 working together. Those 3 overhill town things, that map that I showed you earlier, they all have different dialects of Cherokee. And so there's a little, it's not that we can't understand each other, but there's a little bit of difference in between how we speak and how Cherokee Nation speaks and how United Gadua Band speaks. But we all 3 are working together and sharing resources. Our tribe recently started we have a immersion school, K through 6, for kids to learn. The regular Cherokee Central school system also has language teachers. We started a apprenticeship program where it's an actual job for 2 years. You apply, you're paired with a Cherokee speaker, and you spend all your time with them. And you go farming, and you go hunting, and you do all the things that people do, rather than sitting in a classroom and learning a language that way. It's more experiential. The early 1900s, late 1800s, this is Cherokee people getting ready to play stickball, which is the lacrosse, comes from Cherokee stickball. Well, stickball, every tribe had stickball. It was called the little brother of war, because a lot of times, rather than going to war and killing each other, villages would have a stickball game, and whoever won the stickball game won whatever the question was about.
Let's do it again.
So these are made from wood and leather. The only two rules in stickball is you can't pick the ball up from the ground. You have to use the stickball picks, and they toss them with those things, or you can take it out of the thing with your hand once you have it and toss it. And there are 2 large twigs, sticks at the end of the field, and you have to get the ball through those 2 goalposts, I guess is a good name for it. That's it. You can kick people, you can hit people, you can break bones, with that. They have these people called drivers, these other men, and if it turns into a big wrestling match and it's just a big pylon, they have these big long switches, and they go up there and hit people, hit the guys, and make them start playing the game again. Nice. That's something good. We still have stickball games in Cherokee, and it's a huge deal every year in the fall. Every community has their own stickball team, and the women that are married to, living with the men that are playing, every community has its own colors. And so the men come out on the field, and the women stand at the edge of the field in their community colors and cheer them on. There's a whole culture around stickball. It's really cool, and I'm glad that's what I don't play because I'm a sissy. My dad loved to play, so it gets really, really rough. The chief actually, they had an exhibition game on the campus of UNCA, and Richard Sneed, who's the current chief, actually broke his foot. Rough. Okay. So this is the main part of Cherokee now. This is the town of Cherokee. Haywood County, Cherokee County, all of that huge area that we covered is down to this. This covers mostly Jackson and Swain County. We also have land in Snowbird, which is in Graham County, and Cherokee County. The people in Snowbird are what's left of the. But anyway, there's people get confused. They think all the Cherokee hid out in the mountains when well, that's why we've told people for years at these hills. But what actually happened was, before removal, Quallatown Cherokees, which is where I live, where this is, left Cherokee Nation and became citizens of North Carolina. And so the North Carolina government said, if you will do this, we will give each male 300 acres. So the chiefs and the leaders at that time got together. Counting Bear got Gadua. Other people got Cowie Mound. Other people got Niquosi Mound. And that's how they decided who would get what to protect the sacred spaces. So we were citizens of North Carolina. The people in Graham County were still part of Cherokee Nation in Georgia. They were the people who hid in the mountains and came to Quallatown. Other people helped hide them. Native and white people helped hide them and help feed them. But the soldiers were there rounding up people, and there was a man named Solly and his sons and brothers-in-law attacked one of the soldiers. It's unclear what caused it. It's unclear if the soldier was killed. Apparently the soldier hit or did something to Solly's wife, and that's what set that off. So then Solly and those men ran into the woods and hid into the mountains. So the leaders of the Quallatown Cherokees had a conversation and said, you know, the US government is not going to know who's Quallatown, who's Cherokee Nation, who's doing a snowbird Cherokee. So we need to go get him or they're gonna come up here and start rounding us up. So they did, they went out and got Solly, they brought him in. And at the end of Gadua, I don't know how familiar anybody is with Bryson City or Swain County, but where there's a big farming company or farm there now, Darnell Farms. Solly requested that he be shot by his own people. So they took Solly to that area and the leaders of Qualitown Cherokees executed him. That protected us from being removed with everybody else. So when the Cherokees went out on the Trail of Tears, some people, Jim Lusk was one of the people that came back. Some people ran away from the Army contingents and came back to Cherokee. They either went to Snowbird or they came to Qualitown, where we are now. There's a really good book called Their Determination to Stay, which is written about a Cherokee family. A Cherokee woman is married to a white man in Graham County, and what they did to help save the people that remained or came back after removal. So, okay. I don't want to get too much into removal because that's one other story. So this is Gadua now. This is during the Gadua festival that we have every year. Elementary school kids, these mounds were built by carrying buckets of dirt and piling them on. So elementary kids from the central school system do that. They take buckets of dirt to the mound and put it on there, you know, slowly rebuilding it back up. We don't really want to do anything with Gadua because it's such a sacred site. We do allow tribal members to grow crops on that property. There's been some talk of development, like historical, cultural kind of site, but we don't know that we want everybody down there tramping on it because it's so special to us. So we've had that since '97, and we're still having those discussions about what's the best way to educate people to share this, if we want to share it. So we haven't come to a conclusion about that. Okay, I think that's the last point.
It is.
Okay. That's a quick overview of Cherokee history. There's a lot more stuff. I can provide Scott a list of books for people that want to read more about some of this stuff. I went down a rabbit hole when I was putting this together of mounds. Ended up with a whole bunch of pictures. I'm like, well, this is not a story about mound. No, but it's very easy to get sidetracked into all these different things about Cherokee. Yes. Oh. It's the large area where Cherokee is, where the casino and Unto These Hills and all that is. It's called a boundary because the government didn't give us the land and move us there like they did other times. We actually had to purchase that land. Drowning Bear, one of the chiefs, raised a young white man, his name was Will Thomas, kind of adopted into the tribe at a very crucial time. He didn't do it for that reason, but it turned out to be a very crucial move. We couldn't own property in North Carolina or the United States because we weren't citizens. So, but he could because he was white. So he worked with the tribe and people would give him money and he would buy the property in his name. So when the tribe finally became recognized in the late 1800s by the federal government, they took the deeds or we gave them the deeds for our property. So they hold those in trust. They don't own the land, we do, but we have to go through the Bureau of Indian Affairs. I can sell my land to another Cherokee person. I can't sell it to a non-Cherokee person, and that's to protect our land base. So that's why it's called a boundary and not a reservation. You will see reservation around town on some signs. That's incorrect. Yes.
Is the land still owned by the women?
No. Well, it depends on who, like my sister got my dad's house. So, I mean, you know, if they leave it to a woman, that's okay legally, but it's not, we're not natural landowners. In fact, it disturbs me to no end because we've really adopted that European, no offense, Judeo-Christian idea that women are inferior to men. And people will say, we don't need a woman for chief. We need to stop gay people. That's not cultural. That's not our culture to be exclusive like that. So it upsets me quite a bit that we can't work through those things.
I was interested with the stick game
Mhm.
and, excuse me, how did lacrosse get its name from that game? I used to play lacrosse in boarding school when I was a teenager. I had no idea that there was a connection there.
Europeans adopted it, and I think, I don't know, I've never been asked that question. That's very interesting. I don't know that one of the Indian tribes didn't adopt that name for it themselves. But let me look into that. That's really interesting.
French Canadian.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, one of those northeastern tribes.
Can I
Yes.
ask a question?
Yes, that, go right ahead.
Okay, okay, thanks. My great-great-grandmother was Mahala Snowbird. Does that mean she was in a Snowbird clan, tribe?
She was probably from the Snowbird area.
Okay,
You can do genealogy research on the Museum of the Cherokee Indian website.
okay,
And you can also, I think they have, to be a member of the tribe, you have to have ancestors on the Baker roll. So they have those books available to research that as well. And then the tribe itself has an enrollment office, and you can also look there.
okay, great, thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks.
If you have a perspective on this culture, is that where, people say we're on the unceded land of the Cherokee people? Is that appreciated? Is that feel performative? Is that something that white people are doing to make themselves feel better, or got the practical?
All of the above.
Yeah.
It started out with really good intentions. But it's kind of become a thing. And if, for example, UNC Asheville did a land acknowledgement. But they also have a Cherokee Studies program. They also have a Cherokee Nation professor there. So if you're doing those kind of things, it's an overall thing. But if you're just doing it to make yourself feel good, then we can tell. Yes.
Is there much interest, or kind of what the level of interest amongst younger people in terms of like learning the language and maintaining the cultural traditions?
There is actually been quite a revival with young people in the language and culture, relearning traditional Cherokee dances and Cherokee spirituality and sharing that and raising their families that way. Because the language is available to them in all the school systems that we have, it's kind of like, one of my nephews who's graduating this year, when he was in elementary school, my father had a friend who spoke Cherokee. He was a second language speaker. He was actually white, but he spoke Cherokee fluently. And he would call all the time. And so my nephew answered the phone one day, and Bo would only speak in Cherokee when he answered the phone. And Grissom was just like, I didn't even know he could speak Cherokee. So to them, it's not a big deal. It's a big deal to me because I don't know how to do it. And people my generation. So it's just normal for them. And the Choctaw have done a really good job preserving their language. When they're playing basketball, they speak to each other in Choctaw. So you don't know what they're talking about if you're on the opposing team. So those kind of things inspire our kids to want to learn our language as well.
State, they are part of the nation, what the relationship to Carolina, like, is that question, or is that a thing?
Yeah, we were all loosely confederated as the Cherokee Nation, and as they lost that land, they moved. And so we all ended up in Tennessee, North Carolina, and Georgia. So they were still part of the tribe. They just moved closer together as we lost land. And actually, there were some Cherokees in Georgia who owned plantations and had slaves. And when they did removal, the slaves went with them, and when they got to Oklahoma, they adopted them into the tribe. So their descendants are considered part of Cherokee Nation, and they receive all the benefits that Cherokee Nation citizens. Yes, ma'am. Hey. I do not.
Sheep at conference to about indigo sheep. Is that, anyway, what you were saying earlier about where scientists, were astronomers, were farmers, or this, she was sharing this curriculum base around basket weaving and the spiritual practice, the mathematical, the community building practice that is built into that tradition within and she's part of Cherokee Nation, I'm not sure which or what, but anyway, I thought that was fascinating in the education of sharing that with mainstream education and particularly my interest in community college education. That woven into but is offered, and so I don't know if that's in discussion with young leadership, but I think that exposing our young people that don't indigo to the sheep would be a very fascinating subject for young people to study, even in the K-12.
We've worked with the state of North Carolina for several years to recognize Cherokee language as a foreign language, credit for Cherokee cultural knowledge. They were ready to pass that at one time, and then it went through committee, and then I don't know what happened to it. And something happened like that. The Gadua Language Academy has lesson plans for different age levels, and if anybody calls there, they will send packets of information to any school that wants it ready to go. And those are things that we work with the other tribes to develop and have on hand. The tribe wanted to open a craft school several years ago, and that didn't work out. But what did happen was we worked with Southwestern Community College to do native classes, and you can get certified that way through Southwestern. So there is a precedent for some of that that's happening. Okay, we're gonna stop.
Well, no, any other questions for now? All right, yeah, Tina.
Where he's buried for St. John's. Touche, Franklin, you know who I'm talking about?
I don't.
That's
Fascinating.
Do know that's buried in. I'll ask.
neat. All right. Well, as you can see, this is only scratching the surface. So I look forward to seeing you next week, where James is going to continue to teach us more, and we are going to touch upon the spirituality piece as well. So I look forward to seeing you next week. Go in peace.